Welcome, everyone. It is IKYA Live from Summer Studio. My name is Andy, and IKYA Live is world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program in the world that gives you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. And please subscribe to IKYA.official on YouTube, follow along with all of our content, and share. Even share tonight's video now because anyone can join live as we talk about tonight's topic, which is kind of a heavy one, but it kind of always brings love and light to any topic of the world news. Tonight, we're going to tackle poverty. We're going to look at it from the spiritual perspective, take a little higher perspective on it, and to look at what's going on, why it's happening, and what the future might hold. So it's going to be a really good discussion, and it becomes a discussion by you engaging with us tonight. So please send in your comments and questions and perspective in the chat below. It is how we make this more of a conversation and not so much a report or just a direct teaching. So that's really the purpose of IKYA Live, is to raise our consciousness about the day's headlines by engaging in conversation with IKYA from that spiritual perspective. So please, again, write in your questions and comments in the chat below, and I will relay them to IKYA to engage in the conversation. So we'll be ready in just a moment for IKYA to join us. Until then, what we'd like to start with is the question for today, which is, what is happening with poverty? And it does appear that in the Western world, poverty is on the rise. And is that the case? Why is it happening? So let me signal to IKYA to join, and he'll now join us from Summer Studio. But that's really the question of the day: is poverty on the rise? Where and how is it on the rise, and why? And what does the future look like? So let's see if IKYA can join us here momentarily. All right, here he is. Welcome, IKYA. We are getting ready for our discussion about poverty from the spiritual perspective. And
Good.
the question we posed tonight is, why is poverty on the rise? Why are more and more of us becoming poorer?
Right. I think this is a really interesting question. And this is, first of all, something that affects us in the West. And we'll try to unpack this a little bit. But remember that we have to zoom out, right? And always look at what's going on spiritually. What are the lessons? Why is it that we need to move through certain things, right? So it's our own karma and our own resistance. And in principle, when, for instance, a space expands, this is always the beginning of any spiritual expansion, any evolution. It starts with change in your environment, and then you adapt. Spiritually, it's the same thing. So, when a space expands and becomes more complex, your ability to deal with that space is lowered because you are still in your existing skill set. You haven't learned yet. So, this is what's happening, that the complexity level has increased. The world is incredibly more advanced and complicated and challenging than it was a few decades ago. And yet, in the West, we in many ways have just thought that we can do as we always do, because after all, we are the West and we dictate the rest of the world. And it's taken us some time to understand that it's not the case anymore. So, just that in itself means that we're sliding backwards. So, also on the personal level, when you are in a new space, you start from scratch, right? You're less advanced and you have to learn everything again. And poverty simply means that you've not understood how to survive in that space. So when we incarnate and we move through different spaces, sometimes we can experience different forms of poverty. It can be emotional poverty, it can be money, it can be different forms of social poverty, lack of success, all these different things. So, poverty is not just one thing, it affects us every time we've not yet learned how to survive. And since the world is becoming more complex, we have no idea how to survive based on the new rules. So we all have to be kind of shaken up a little bit and not take things for granted. So that's one of the most important things that is going on, which means we all have to learn. And when we get less secure, when we don't think, well, I will just have my things and life will just go on as normal. When we experience that is no longer the case, we're more willing to learn. We're more willing to adapt. These are the rules of evolution. So this is an important premise. And number two, which I think is so interesting, because this is hardly ever discussed, low self esteem. Now, when you think of it, you have low self esteem. Maybe not in all areas of life, but in some of them. And it could also be that you have self worth issues, that you don't feel worthy, right? As I've said many times before, humans spend 99% of their mind power to tell themselves terrible things. We pull ourselves down, we talk down to ourselves and say that we don't deserve, we're not worthy, we're terrible, all of that. So when we have self-worth issues, it means we do not allow ourselves to go farther than is accepted by how you think about yourself, because your self-worth issues will stop you. If you say, I don't deserve this, and you say it many times enough, you will sabotage it. You will attack it until it's gone. The thing is, it's not just you, it's everyone. So it's a miracle that we have civilization at all. This is basically the level. This is the top level. And in many ways, we have reached the ceiling. When you see that, when we have more stuff, right, that's also when our self sabotage will kick in. When we have self worth issues, I don't deserve it, blah, blah. And you know it from your own life. But think of a whole civilization filled with beings that are doing exactly that. So we have begun attacking ourselves. We have begun sabotaging ourselves and feeling guilty for having good lives, feeling guilty for having access to food and water and whatever. And that shame and guilt and low self worth means that we're not now actively sabotaging and pulling back. And we're doing it collectively as well as individually. Remember also that people with ambition and success, I've explained this in many times, it comes from often a place of low self worth. Now, if somebody told you that you're terrible and you're worth nothing as a kid, often you will choose to have the strategy, I will show them. I will get to the top and I will show everyone. That is what ambition is. It is always to try to compensate for a pain point. So it's still a product of low self-worth. So we get to a ceiling of what we allow ourselves. And some people can allow themselves a lot of material wealth. Maybe they do not allow themselves to have any emotional intimacy, for instance. So we're filled, this society is filled with individuals trying to sabotage themselves. So when we've hit the ceiling of what we can allow ourselves collectively, that's where it stops. And this is as far as we've gone. And we're not able to go further until we deal with our issues. And just one more point before we take questions, that I lost my train of thought. So we can go to the question. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was what struck me is I think I've heard it said that in a way spiritual abundance or spiritual poverty and material poverty are sort of inversely related, that the more material wealth we have, often the more spiritually impoverished we become. And the opposite often when we have in a way nothing, then we often can have a richer spiritual life. Is there anything to that?
No.
No.
It's just, we all want to justify our own patterns, right? And it's true that many people who've been attracted to spirituality, they've not been successful at living. So this is the plan B, right? And when we then look at not being able to function in life, because many people in spirituality are deeply dysfunctional. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just how it is. And all of you who are watching, it's true. Um, so then we try to justify that. I say, well, it's because I'm so spiritual. It's because I'm so detached that God will not allow me to have anything, right? When the opposite is true, is that you haven't figured out how to survive. And remember, as I said, for each space, each level of consciousness, you have to learn survival again. So it
Mm,
doesn't mean that you're struggling with survival on the same level as people with no spiritual connection, because your rules will be more advanced, right? So your struggles are more complex, more difficult. But one of the results may be that you're struggling with material wealth. So, yeah, you can be on a high level of consciousness and have enormous wealth. You can also be dead poor. It really depends on where you are in your own study in the space of consciousness where you find yourself. So do not try to turn poverty into some kind of divine quality. It is not. It's a
mm.
sign of having not learned how to survive on that level.
But that
Mhm.
is a very typical sort of misunderstanding in spiritual communities is that in order to be spiritual or to achieve enlightenment, you're supposed to let go of everything material.
Yes, and the reason for that is when we are in low level consciousness, we have a lot of attachment,
Mm,
right? And we attach ourselves to everything. We like, oh, we get distracted, we get obsessed, we get all of these things. And if I cannot focus on God when all of these things get in the way.
mm,
And it's so much easier when others pull away from all that. Then I can sit in peace and meditate and pray and whatever we want to do. The challenge is that praying and meditation is not the point. It's mastering life, because that is the true spiritual practice. It's learning to see God in everything. It's learning to truly see oneness and practice oneness for real. It's very easy for anyone to be fooled and believe that we are in a higher level of consciousness when we sit by ourselves with no distractions, no expectations, no bills, nothing
mm.
to do, and then dedicate ourselves to spiritual work and
So
because
it's
we're in a
kind of
vacuum.
more, it's sort of the opposite where if if we master more of the manifestation, but also with love and heart and that centeredness, that's really more the spiritual practice than the quiet by
Exactly.
yourself with nothing.
Yes. And this is the core of
Mm,
what I teach. It's what happens after transcendence. Transcendence is the easy part. That's for kids. And that's what people seek, because it's like, oh, let me just let go of everything and be spiritual. And then when you reach a high level of consciousness, you say, oh, I'm disconnected from everything. Right. It's about living it. It's about being able to see God in everything and behave accordingly.
mm.
So you re enter the world and you practice and you take part and you learn and you get to understand that it's through living, meeting your challenges. That's how you work on your karma, not by sitting in a vacuum, because then you will not really be challenged. You need to understand it on all levels, including the physical, practical level. And I've seen so many people who've dedicated their life to spiritual studies, and it's like poke at them and they fall over because they have no strength. They have no ability to deal with life for real.
So can
So
I
that
ask,
that
yeah,
yeah,
what then explains, so it, like the US in particular has, I mean, had 200 years of increasing quality of life and also mastery of manifestation. I mean, the US has really manifested so much for so long, and yet now we're seeing this very marked increase in material poverty. How
yes.
is that happening?
It's what I said. It's the complexity level, because it's more complex, and it's the self-worth issues among other things. But it's also one principle that is extremely important to understand. I've like written it down in the sequence, so I'll read my iPad here. It's based on dependency and entitlement, and understanding that after the Second World War, one built a civilization, right? And the modern world, and everyone was invited, and everyone had a sense of purpose and built and all of that. Now, what has happened over time is that that has changed into dependency and entitlement and addiction. And the steps is basically, if you give someone something once, they will appreciate it.
Mm,
And if you give it to them twice, they will immediately then have the anticipation of it happening a third time, because then they, oh, it might happen again. And if they get it the third time, they will then create an expectation that this will continue. And by the fourth time, they will have created an sense of entitlement that this, of course, now this is supposed to happen. And by the fifth time, you will have created a dependency. And the next step then is you create a dependency addiction, and then you're lost. So this is basically what's happened in the Western world, that when we get used to things, we get used to also anything from social programs and society working, taking care of us. The intention is good, right? We want to include everyone, but what happens is that we slowly start moving through these different levels. And when we've achieved dependency, when we look at how we function today as humans, we have entitlement and dependency and addiction.
mm,
That's all. So we just expect things to work. And the interesting thing is, we have also built that strategy with corporations. So we're now addicted to corporations, where we are dependent on corporations. And we feel a sense of entitlement that we should just be able to complain if things should work. We're not in the state any longer collectively where we feel we are responsible for our own survival.
mm,
So in the beginning, as I said, like after the Second World War, people were in this state of appreciation, and it just slowly moved. And understanding that when we reach the state of entitlement, we stop being creative, because why would we? It's not necessary. It's there. It should be there because I deserve it.
mm,
And then when I depend on it, we just get angry if we don't get what we want, and we don't understand how to do it to ourselves. Just think of how we relate to our gadgets, right? How we relate to food today. We're not growing our own food, it's just there. We become dependent on entities outside ourselves in a way we cannot control.
mm,
And then when we are addicted, we want that to be a reality. So the only form of poverty we concentrate on, the only form of wealth is material wealth, because that's what we are addicted to. So we just want more money so we can be even more addicted to what the corporations are doing. And there's a, a very interesting aspect to this, is that throughout history, wealth has been the social fabric, right? It's been your family, it's your community, it's who you are in that context, and that you've been contributing, you've been someone, right? And that has been your wealth. And that has been the key to success and how humans have been building wealth, because we can't do it on our own. So when we today have reached a state of entitlement, we don't understand that I have to contribute, I have to build, I have to go beyond my own survival and assist and become someone to other people. I have to bring value. Now it's about what can I get out of it, and if I don't go and get what I want, I'll just scream. I'll just yell and complain, because this is not my responsibility. It's the responsibility of the government or the corporations. So we
mm,
become a little bit lost. And we have basically today, because of our addiction, it happens, when they're addicted to drugs or whatever, that becomes your singular focus. So today we think that material stuff will cure everything. right? We identify not through our families, but through brands. We the corporations have become our families, and the substitute things have become what we relate to because they don't demand anything. As long as we pay, we're in control. We don't have to go beyond our own needs,
Mm,
which is extremely immature, and it makes us it turns us into slaves, just like any form of addiction. And we don't understand the social fabric anymore. This is why people abandon their families, even their friends. Everything is so difficult, and we relate to gadgets instead.
mm,
So the social fabric of our society is dissolving, and we have chosen that corporations replace it, which means we become even less creative because when we interact with other people, we understand more our own sense of survival and theirs, and we help each other, right? We work together, we do things together. So by replacing that with corporations, we lose even more creativity because it's just pushing a button and I get what I want.
mm.
Mhm.
So you talk about the corporations, and that part to me is less obvious. At least it's not talked about much in the news media. But the government is absolutely talked about, and politicians talk about the welfare state all the time, both here in Europe and in the United States. What role do you see the government's playing in creating more poverty?
Well, the challenge is how we operate as individuals. Understand our DNA, our genetics work a certain way. We're geared towards survival and struggling to survive, and we're not all meant to live. Those are
Mm,
the rules of evolution. So when we want everyone to be included, no matter what, it starts out again appreciation. And when you look at the social programs, most of them were developed in the 50s and 60s. People had appreciation,
mm, yeah.
and gradually it becomes entitlement. And in France, I think it was like 20 years ago or something, or even further back, it was so funny because like the unemployed went on strike, right?
The unemployed.
It's a very interesting concept, but this is what you end up with, right? Because they want more money, so they went on strike. How can they possibly do that? But it's still the sense of entitlement that the world owes you something. And we've created that narrative in the West. And it's not just government. It's so easy to look at government programs, but our dependency on corporations are even worse because it kills our creativity because we're not doing anything ourselves. So the combination of the kind of social programs and the corporations have basically killed us.
Well,
Most people today are almost mindless slaves to their own emotions and needs and have no ability to truly survive or to be creative or to contribute to the world in any significant way.
wouldn't the biggest irony of the sort of modern welfare state be that one of the primary sources of funding it is taxing wealth and profit, and which is that is the very like result of creativity and innovation. And if
Exactly.
you're taxing that to support sort of brand and corporation dependent poverty, it's gonna be just an awful sort of yeah, repeating cycle.
Yes. And it's difficult and sticky because running a civilization is difficult, right? And it's all people. So politically, this is extremely tricky because, to my experience, most politicians they have good intentions, at least to start with, and they want to do good, and they have different ideas on how to achieve it. But it's we have created a monster in the West that makes it very difficult to change, for people to be creative, for them to focus on their own survival because they don't have to. We become lazy and self-centered. And the interesting thing is also when we have a state of like sense of entitlement, because we don't feel responsible anymore, right? When we don't have any responsibility, we have a lot of expectations. This is how infants operate. They need
Mm.
others to survive. So what they do is try to use um, shame and guilt and screaming and yelling to get what they want because they can't do it themselves. They've not, they're not in a state where they can survive on their own. So they have to manipulate as much as they can, and all they can do is complain and scream. And when you look at a lot of young people today, that's what they're doing. They have lost their ability to be kind of the navigators in their own lives, to be creative and to master their own survival because they think that's someone else's responsibility. So they yell and complain and criticize, and they're so dominated by their own feelings and emotions and think that is important for everybody. This is how babies operate. So the although we started out after the war gradually having a good intention that we want to include everyone and create a better life for everyone, we could not, well, we could, but humans could not anticipate the result, that it would gradually turn people into mindless slaves of comfort.
Mm,
And again, this is why we're today, I'm just going to move because of the light. This is also why we're slipping backwards, right? Because we are in the West. When we just want to be, pleased, we are in this addiction. We don't think longer than our own needs, which means we will buy stuff from countries that can also produce it more cheaply, not thinking that we might undermine our own country workers, businesses, right?
mm,
So unemployment, we slip backwards, and the wealth is being built in Asia because we're not able to connect to the social fabric anymore. Well, I'll just buy cheap stuff because I want to. You don't care any longer if your neighbor will lose his job because of it,
yeah,
because that's not your responsibility, right?
mm,
It used to be very different, but understand that we have changed our mindset and our psychology in the West to become immature, mindless slaves. And when we look at that, we can say, yeah, maybe it's good for us to experience different forms of poverty. Maybe that will wake us up a little bit.
mm. So, can I ask more of a principle question?
Hmm.
Jasper writes in on YouTube, and Jasper's been studying with IKYA for some time, and I think he's trying to really understand how you talk about abundance. And so he has heard you say in the past that abundance can be channeled,
Hmm.
and yet one cannot get rich from work in today's world. And yet,
Exactly.
you said that the flaws of the West is a lack of work ethic. And on the other hand, the law of attraction is not the way either. So I can see he's trying to kind of figure out, pin you
Right.
down on what, how do we get a more abundance?
As I said, we can never manifest beyond our own level of consciousness. That's it. And this is the answer to all of these questions. Yes, we can channel whatever we vibrate. Abundance is also a consciousness, it's an energy. But if you are in deep self worth issues, right? If that's your awareness, there's no way you can possibly manifest abundance because you don't want to. You feel you don't deserve it and you will sabotage yourself. And that's why you want abundance to start with, because abundance is a natural state where you accept your flow and where life just flows through and you flow through life. So when that's not happening, it's because you're blocking it actively. And then no like magical techniques will make it happen. You have to reach the state of consciousness where this naturally happens. So in spiritual work, we always start with what's happening within. It starts with us. It starts with our karma, our resistance, and understanding how to go beyond that, how to work out the different forms of resistance we have so that we can
Mm,
allow the flow of life to just flow naturally without trying to manipulate it. We basically have to stop manipulating ourselves, right? Even self worth issues, it's creating stories that are not true, that we are worthless and we're terrible and all of these things. Nobody loves me, all of that. It's not true, it's false. So we're manipulating ourselves into poverty. right? So when we lower our level of consciousness and lower our skill set, yeah, that's the result you get. As I said, like the spiritual expansion is mostly about stopping sabotaging, stopping blocking, stopping hurting ourselves. It's more about that than trying to achieve something. And it can be so frustrating once you actually understand it and you can still see that you're doing it, right? To stop hurting yourself, to
Mm,
stop attacking yourself, because that's where the energy goes. That's how we block the natural flow that is always healing, always abundant. But how humans always been able to kind of compensate and overcome that is through the social fabric, because it means that in a group you play on each other's strengths. This is how humans started to form groups and villages and all of that, and depend on each other because they understood that, all right, this person is really good at this, I'm really good at that, and then we can both work together. So the social fabric is an agreement where we all contribute with the best intentions and with our greatest strengths, and we work together. It's very important for the human life form to feel a sense of purpose, and purpose only starts when it's beyond your own self-interest and your own survival, right? So it can be taking care of your family, right? It can also be achieving success. It can developing products and bringing them to the market where I feel I'm really doing something great. It can be an organization, it can be in church, it could be whatever, but it's doing something beyond the self-interest. And humans generate so much energy when they do that because that is how humans have survived. It's not through individual survival, it's through collaboration.
mm,
That is the key to true survival and how to win in the game of evolution.
mm.
And this is also when you look at the theory of evolution, one has accepted uh, several decades ago that it's really about collaboration. That is the key to success, going beyond the self and the individual survival and surviving together,
Mm.
working together. And started, we began to lose that in the West completely. And it's just about what can I get out of it and what other people should take care of it. They need to take responsibility. They're doing it wrong because it feels wrong to me.
But isn't it also then a contributing factor to increasing poverty in the West that Western countries have become more isolationist and more protectionist and not wanting that global collaboration of production and trade and all that?
I think the West started it by moving production to low cost countries,
Mm,
right? So the West wanted that and basically built the globalized world. The problem is that people in the West thought that, yeah, they're just down there. We can dominate them. They will never reach our level because, after all, we're better than they are. And slowly, they see that that's not really true. They can go to school, they can have ambition, they can learn, they can take over, and they are. And because they are not complacent, right? They're earlier in the cycle. So they are in the more that anticipation state that, ooh, we've achieved
mm,
something, we're learning, so this could go on. So they're inspired and they keep driving. They've not yet reached the ceiling of self worth issues. They will at some point. And you will see that in China over time, that will become an issue just like here.
mm.
That at some point you've reached as far as you can with the current level of consciousness. So, but we're earlier in that cycle. But it was, to me, quite cute how people in the West really, really thought for real that the Asian cultures would not catch up.
So a key he writes in a question on YouTube about well that he's been living in a materially poor level at this time, and he sees that that's kind of the level of his spiritual consciousness. Um, his question to you is, should he stop trying to be richer and instead stop for a while and adapt to the level that he's currently on right now? It is so easy to seek too high a level and then give up instead of honoring the actual level we are on. And he asks
Yes,
for your
like,
thoughts on
yes. One fun way to look at this is like, stop trying to be poor.
that.
Because that is also a part of it, as in how we block ourselves, how we attack ourselves through our issues, through our resistance. Because when we have a story about ourselves, we will try to manifest that again and again, and we will
Mm,
sabotage. So when we do that, it doesn't matter how much wealth pours in, we will completely destroy because we are not in a state of acceptance inside. So, as I said, the natural state is abundance and flow. It doesn't mean that you necessarily will be rich, but it's always in harmony with your actual survival needs. That's the default. And I
mm,
mean, survival isn't then not just about not dying, it's about being in harmony, feeling good, being good, doing good, and see that it works. So you are able to contribute more to the world around you than you take. And yet you live abundantly.
mm,
It's also important to, as if, understand that most rich people, they are extremely poor. I say because they can be lack of intimacy, lack of family, lack of empathy, lack of connection. Most rich people are completely empty inside. Uh, and it's not, yay, finally, but it's just a fact that often when you achieve great things, it comes from this emptiness and this story, this negative story you have about yourself. And then when you achieve your goals, it doesn't help. So you have then sacrifice everything, and then you have, as I say, like you got it all, but that's also all you got. You lack everything else. Of course, there are many wealthy people who are also very happy and live wonderful lives, but those are the exceptions. Uh, so there are many forms of poverty, and the richest people I meet on this planet are often people with very little wealth. When you go to, for instance, the African continent, I met so many great people that they are rich, they're wealthy because they have this enormous flow. They're truly standing in themselves. They have integrity. They have a huge kind of social fabric and a huge network, and they know where they belong. And they know that they have friends that will take care of them, and they take care of them. It's that sense of belonging, safety, comfort, purpose. It's not down to how much matter we have, right? So in our own lives, we focus in the West, we become obsessed with material wealth. If you go back 40, 50 years, it wasn't so. People were still interested in other people. They were interested in contributing, being someone, having a high level of ethics, contributing, and they found joy and purpose in that. So we have lost it because we become addicted and entitled,
mm,
and thereby lowered our own level of consciousness as become children. This is also one thing I find interesting with also what we talked about before, why, for instance, Muslims are so successful, because they have two key elements. It's family, which is that social fabric and that enormous network. And then you have religion, which also offers the same. So when you have these two levels of social fabric operating on, uh, at the same time in the same space, and you've been brought up to do your part and to contribute, of course, abundance is created.
mm,
You feel confident in yourself. You feel rich because you know you have like people have got your back. You mean something to other people, and you mean something to them. You can fight and do all of that, but you love them, and you feel a sense of purpose. So you want to stretch, not just to compensate for your pain, but to also to make other people proud, and because you know you can make a difference, right? And this is what we've lost.
mm,
So also in the West, for instance, in the States, it's a well-known fact that often religious people are happier. they do better in life. It's not because of church itself, but it's because of what church represents.
Mm.
It has still the social fabric and that sense of purpose that other people may not feel when they disconnect from their families and get addicted to brands and corporations.
So Aki goes on to offer a quote that he's heard that being useless is a privilege of the rich. And it made
Mhm.
him reflect over how much creativity his parents and grandparents' generations have had. And he's amazed at what they have managed to do with so little, and is equally amazed how today we are able to do so little with so much. And he's wondering, is it then that becoming richer always makes us more stupid and lazy?
Yes, because
Okay.
can, can, convenience will make us lazy. And
Mm,
again, laziness is a form of entitlement,
mm,
right? Because we think it should just happen. We have disconnected from our own contribution, right? And if we think of survival, that's dangerous. And as a society, we will then slip backwards. We will lose. And I say it's when we think that we don't have to do it. And the thing is, like when you own a house, it's constant work. You always have to do things. There's always something. When you reach the point of dependency, you don't even understand that you should do anything. It's just like a child. A
mm,
child will scream and yell, be very entitled because they don't understand how to contribute and they can't. So if a child owned a house, it will fall apart, right? It will just over time deteriorate and fall apart. So we have become children, irresponsible children. And then we have a house, which is our civilization, and it's beginning to fall apart because we're not taking care of it, because we think it should just be there. It's like when you inherited a house, right, from your grandparents, and you just, yeah, I got a house, and then you don't do anything,
mm,
right? It will fall apart. And when you look at the sense of entitlement among many young people who basically believe that they're the greatest ever and that the world kind of started when they got born. Nothing before that is significant, right? It means that, and they this young generation is the generation with the lowest skill set. With They don't know anything really. Some people do, but when you look at them, they're extremely entitled. And it's not a criticism, it's understanding how each generation have become more complacent, more lazy, and more disconnected from survival. And now humans have become kids. So they don't understand that they should contribute. They just look at the world and say, like, someone else's fault.
mm,
So it will fall apart. And at some point, when it falls apart enough, even when you inherited a house, if it starts falling apart and the roof blows off and nothing works, plumbing doesn't work, no electricity, at some point you will start doing something, right? Because you have to for your own
mm,
survival. Humans always want to survive, even when they don't want to survive. It's just how we want to survive. But when we have reached the level, even surpass the level of what we allow ourselves, we will start behaving this way and we will lower our standard of living until we're comfortable and then we can build from there. And becoming more real and more connected to survival, I think for people in the West is extremely healthy. And for instance, what's happening in the States where more and more people are getting poor and they don't seem to mind. It's just happening. When it's seen middle class, lower middle class sliding backwards, and they just accept it. They just gradually grow into it, which means that's the level of consciousness that they are actually in. This is how much they're actually able to deal with. Society is stretched too far. So it's a healthy correction. And this is a spiritual journey that people in the West need to also go through Also adapting to the fact that, yes, as a global community, there will be a certain pressure equalization, which means that wealth will be moving, expertise will be moving, and we will get more poverty. As part of this, we'll be blended more together, and it's not necessarily that the Western countries will be on top anymore.
mm,
It will be more complex. We will have a multi-polar, um, globalized world, and the Western narrative will not be the only one. And it's just very interesting, but it increases complexity and increases what we need to do in order to survive. But at some point, people in the West will reach the bottom where they feel, oh, right, okay, this is it. We want to move away from this, right? We've reached the point where there's no electricity and water, and now we want to do something with it. But then you will start having this new cycle where people are actually interested in real education and contributing to the world around them. Because, when you struggle and you realize, oh, I actually need other people, you will behave better. You will treat them nicely. You will take care of your family. You will love them.
mm,
You will try to go beyond your own needs, and you will be kind of corrected into a healthier form of behavior. So, this will also happen in the West. So, I see this as a very healthy movement, but it's unpleasant, and it can scare a lot of people to see that both, their sense of wealth and other people's sense of wealth, we're sliding backwards, it seems. But we're
mm,
actually correcting our material wealth to the level we allow. So if you want more, you have to allow more. You have to learn then to be someone
mm,
who creates abundance. It doesn't just happen through wishful thinking. Abundance can be built. And you then have to become a person that vibrates abundance instead of poverty. And I meet so many people in the West that is just vibrating poverty on so many levels. And this is what we need to look at in ourselves. If you feel impoverished mentally, emotionally, social network, in your life in general, it could be culture, it could be education, it could be all of that, and we create this sense of poverty and this energy for ourselves, that is what we will create.
mm,
So, and the antidote in many ways is appreciation
mm,
turning into gratitude, because gratitude attracts. When you are truly, truly grateful, you're saying, yes, I actually want this. I allow myself to take this in. I allow myself to receive and use this, and I'm grateful. It's an active state of appreciation. And that means that you will be attracting more of it.
mm,
Expectation, dependency, and entitlement, that repels because you're not co creative. You're just ready to criticize, right? You're basically like a person getting a free meal at a restaurant and then complaining to the chef. This is the essence of Western behavior at this point, and it repels abundance. We need to learn to be grateful for everything. And often, I've seen in many poorer countries, people are a lot more grateful there than in the West. We become
mm,
arrogant, self centered assholes. And we need to learn gratitude. Be grateful for everything you do have, because that is how you get more of it. If you don't even see what you have, if you think, oh, that's nothing, it is not nothing. Even poor people in the West can be, by standards of many poor countries, they can still be rich. But we complain, we feel sorry for ourselves. We need to work on gratitude. Gratitude is active appreciation, which means you appreciate people around you. You don't take anything for granted. If you don't take something for granted, because that's the opposite of entitlement, you take care of it. You see it as precious, right? And you are in a state of love and you give and you want to nurture whatever you have because that's how you appreciate. It's not because you're afraid of losing it, but it's because you love it and you allow yourself to love it. So, the most important practice you can have is to practice gratitude. Try to go through everything you can be grateful for every day, not just as a thought, but try to focus on it. And each day your list should get longer as you begin to see more and more things you can be grateful for. And even your challenges, because they make you stronger, they assist you in working out your karma. Difficult situations that may humble you, it's important to open the heart. It's not just the good stuff, the pleasant stuff, it's everything. Gratitude attracts. So, this is how you open yourself to abundance. It's not difficult. But when we look at the psychology in the West, there is a complete lack of gratitude, and it has been replaced with entitlement and dependency and addiction. Any more questions? Mhm.
We do. Martina in Germany, she says, I know people who promise performance without ever keeping it. These people act like an expert without actually being an expert. They drive expensive cars, they have expensive hobbies, and they feel that their appearance oppresses others. Is that self-esteem or arrogance or something else? And where's the limit?
Right? I think, everybody, what we are all here to do is to experiment with our own level of consciousness and our resistance and our exact point of evolution. And we all start with assumptions. All right? We think we know what we're doing. We think we understand ourselves. And we think we understand what we should do in order to improve our lives. And we don't. But that's the fun part. Once you begin to wake up, it's just exciting that you start with an assumption and then you interact with life. And life will then give you a response that enables you to correct what you're doing. So, in a way, other people do what they need to do. But yes, the motivation behind most forms of success is pain. As I say, it's you have a pain point and then you're trying to compensate. And for most people, any form of success is a thought of revenge, right? I want to show them. I want to increase my value so I can feel better than other people. It's always that revenge thing. And this is also why when many people reach a certain level of material wealth, they can't wait to show other people and to be better than them and push them down because now I'm better than other people because they feel that they are inferior to start with.
Mm,
And think of what we all want to achieve in a way is a state of balance, right? So if you feel that you're like way down there, you need more in order to feel that you have a head above water. And that's when you can breathe. Many people, when they seek success in whatever field they're doing it, is because they feel they can't breathe until they get there.
mm,
So then they just feel normal. And I've compared this to when you take drugs like heroin, for instance. In the beginning, it gets you high, right? Over time, you don't get any of that. You need to take heroin in order to feel just zero, to feel normal. And it's that. So pain and the obsession with your own pain will basically drive you down. So you'll feel that you're drowning and you will have to go like further and further on the ladder in order just to feel you got head above water. So then it will be arrogant and whatever else, but it's really about your fight to try to survive. But I will still say, at least you're doing something, right? And as long as people are trying to survive and do what they think is necessary, it's better than doing nothing because
mm,
it's still that interacting with life and it will still be challenging, and they will still have to work on their karma. The worst thing we can possibly do is sit there. So, being addicted to corporations, sit there and complain and just buy stuff and be into your own emotions and needs. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
It's much better than to be ambitious, to behave like a complete arrogant asshole to everyone, but at least you're interacting with the world. As long as we're actively interacting and we're being creative, we're trying to figure out how to win, life will show us. We will be confronted with our own karma. We will be confronted with our own resistance. And over time, we will understand, we will get it, we will transform. And you see so many of people, for instance, in business, it could be in entertainment industry, whatever, if they survive over time, first they get this enormous ego when they first hit success. And then over time, it's not that interesting anymore. And at some point, they begin to mellow and they can become really, really good people because they have seen through their own ego. They've seen through all the illusions of whatever were driving them to the top, right? So that can happen too. But at least it means they've tried, they've done something. And in the West, we've lost that, right? Because now how to win is basically who's the bigger victim raffle. And it's very unhealthy. And that is also part of why we're sliding backwards.
Mm. So Aki asks what a more practical question. This extreme level of poverty that you're talking about coming to the West at in the future, will that affect everyone, or will there be like much bigger divisions of classes where, for example, the rich will have water, electricity, and food, and the poor will not?
It will be a division because people want it to be that way.
Mm.
And again, it's so important to understand that whatever politics we have, whoever runs government, it doesn't change anything. What manifests will be the collective consciousness of the people. So when there is this collective sense of self-worth issues and guilt and shame, and when people attack themselves and they're in this deep um, state of addiction and dependency, this will happen because now it's basically the addicts and the drug dealers. This is what we're seeing in the West today. The drug dealers get rich, and the drug dealers can be whoever will nurture the addiction behavior in the population, right? When you produce something that gets popular, just look at, for instance, our gadgets and different apps and all that. They are designed to trigger the addictive
Mm.
brain, right? One produces products that are designed to trigger addiction. And those people, they get rich, right? And often, as you see also with real drugs in the real world, a lot of drug dealers, they don't use drugs themselves. They're too smart. They understand how to utilize the weakness and exploit the weakness in others. And we have created an economy where corporations and businesses are allowed to do that because we want it to be that way.
Mm.
So when the division increases, it's because that represents the actual level of consciousness. Many people today, because of everything that's happening, they have this, their awakening is ignited. And when you start this spiritual awakening, over time, your sense of survival will also be triggered. And there's, I have responsibility. This is my path. I have to be productive in the world too. So you contribute and you will do better. And so many people who are successful entrepreneurs today, they're also on a spiritual path,
Mm.
whether they know it or not, because they are in the process of awakening.
Mm.
So it's not just the drug dealers anymore. Where we're living now is an awakening of creativity, right? And the creative minds, the creative people, they will do well. Those who lack creativity and you've fallen asleep, they will become poor. right? And you've seen the middle class, for instance, right? The typical middle class life, you do the right things, right? You know the right people. You do this, you do that, you wear the right clothes. Lack of creativity. It's simply
Mm,
a matter of being recognized, getting confirmation, but there's nobody home. They're fallen asleep already, right? So then they have to slid backwards and fall down to the level where they can actually awake. And this is what's happening. So the division is natural, and there's no policy that can stop it. Because the joke, as I love from Thatcher, the problem with socialism is that sooner or later we'll run out of other people's money. That thing will happen. There's a limit to how much you can try to spread things out without punishing and attacking the people who are creative. Because creative people, they will always find a way. People who want to be rich, they will always figure out the loopholes and how to be rich. So it's difficult to stop that. But it's not a problem for society that people get rich. It's a problem that people are poor.
mm.
But often today in the West, we're so obsessed with everyone being equal that we rather punish the rich, right? And think that's a solution instead of enabling poor people to wake up, to get better skills, to become creative, to get engaged in their own survival. Because that is the solution over time. But again, when the consciousness is that low, that's what they need to experience because that's their level. That's how far they've come in their own understanding of survival. It's bound to happen. It has to happen, and it will correct um, the illusion that people in the West have been living in now for a few decades.
So one last question is the dystopian writers of the 1930s and 40s, like Orson Welles in 1984, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. But funny enough, even Ayn Rand with The Fountainhead and all of her books, there seems to be what were they tuned into? Because their writing seems to be very prescient and almost a warning of the future to come that
Right,
we clearly didn't or were not able to listen to or to do anything with. Were they tapped
right,
into something? Wasn't it an attempt to prevent? Was it preventable to this where we've come
right.
today?
Now, when it comes to many of these writers and people, what they tapped into is the fact that you cannot change human nature
Mm,
because ideologies, where they fail, is that they think that you can redesign human nature. If you just change the environment and change the premise, then people will adapt to that and become someone else. Human nature is what it is, and it's still quite primitive. And people do what they do no matter where they are. And it's then looking at how human nature behaves and what will then happen, when you have all of these different political system or whatever. That's what they tapped into. So human nature, meaning that this biological life form combined with the consciousness in it, that dictates behavior, that dictates what will happen and what we need to go through. And we have tried to create a civilization where we can protect each other from our own karma, right? To create a world where nobody needs to be challenged, where we don't have to deal with our own shortcomings, our own resistance, and where everything should be compensated for. So we can live wonderful lives and where we can fall asleep and it can all be wonderful. Spiritually, it's not why we're here. So that
mm,
experiment had to end, and it has ended. It just takes a little while before it's really ended because life is extremely brutal and loving at the same time. Brutal in the way that it's math. Math is brutal in the way that there is no discussion, there is no leverage, there is no buffer. It is what it is. And so it is with your karma. your assistance and the response you get from life. When you meet life with your assumptions, life will just say, no, this is how it works. So a functional spiritual society will be allowing for everyone to be mirrored based on their exact place of evolution so that they can learn and unfold and build their own consciousness and build their skills and unfold all their talents. That does not happen by trying to stop karma from unfolding, from trying to stop everything bad from ever happening to make everybody feel good. Our weaknesses are basically what's holding us back, not our strengths. And we need to also feel the pain of our weaknesses so that we get incentivized to do something about them. Because where we feel lazy spiritually is it's stopping us. And again, when we don't do something about it, that will stop our whole progress because we kind of have to move like one being. You can't just let your arm stretch indefinitely. The rest of the body has to be attached to it. So whenever you are holding yourself back, whenever you have an attachment or some type of um, belief or structure or pattern that is simply stuck, that as far as you can go. So when we have societies trying to cover that over so you don't have to experience the results or the consequences of your patterns, then you will not grow,
mm,
right? Because you can't move any further and just get used to it. So you need to be mirrored. It has to be painful. It's how we learn. It's how we decide, I want to move on, and then we figure it out. So the Western society has been trying to help everyone not to experience their own karma, but life finds a way. So where we're moving on this planet is a much more challenging and exciting place where when you apply your creativity, your curiosity, your talents, and you want to be awake, when you want to contribute, which means moving into an active state of purpose, right? You cannot find purpose. You decide to be in a state of purpose by going beyond your own needs and contribute to the world beyond yourself. Okay? That is what purpose is. Then you will expand your own consciousness. Then life will be in this dialogue with you, and you will be able to figure out how am I holding myself back, right? Because many people now slipping back into poverty, it's basically because they're holding themselves back. And when the fabric of government is not there to help them, they will slip back to their actual level of survival competence,
mm,
and then it's up to them.
mm,
So this is important. This is how life is now correcting the bubble of the West. The world owes you nothing. You are 100% responsible for your own survival, for your own success, for your own spiritual awakening. Nobody's there to help you. That's also the exciting thing. Once you begin to wake up spiritually, you have every opportunity. Everything in life is available to you, but you have to learn how to use it. And by doing so, you unpack yourself, you get to know yourself and your skills, and you learn to master life instead of being a passenger.
mm,
So, this is the Western poverty now is an invitation from life to get with the program, become creative, use your skills, learn something, change, grow out of our old ways. Life is abundant by its being. We have to grow out of how we block everything. And in the West, we have blocked a lot. We need
mm,
to become more alive. So we need to connect with our pains and our strengths, and we have to grow into a state where we are responsible, where we use it not just for ourselves, but for the world, right? This is where the West has to go. This is how we achieve success, both individually and as a society. And if we're not able to go there, we will slide back to the level that reflects our actual survival skills. And that is your journey too. So do not be afraid. If you decide to develop your skills, develop your sense of responsibility, develop your sense of purpose, be someone, right? Do the job, do the work, be excited about life, be grateful, take care of people around yourself. You will get successful in so many different ways. And you will feel that your life is a fulfilling place to be. It's not difficult at all. It's just that people in the West have fallen asleep completely. And now they're basically falling off the sofa. That's what's happening. And it doesn't mean that's happening to you. You have to take responsibility and take the wheel and become someone important to yourself and to other people. It's not difficult at all. If you vibrate life, if you appreciate life, if you want a juicy, zestful life filled with love, filled with interaction where you can be creative and where it can build, you will not stop. And you will not for a single second believe that you're entitled to anything. You will go and build it. You will go and create it. You will find people. You will have fun. And this is what we need to do, all of us. So try to recognize in yourself where you're being passive and entitled and dependent. Stop that. Wake up and take charge and create it yourself, right? Become someone who also lifts other people and show them how to be more creative and to take responsibility for their own lives. It's really that simple. And it's also that fun.
Mhm. So, IKYA, we have a special request for the end of our episode tonight. Jasper was wondering if you might give us a meditation exercise or affirmation to help us, wake up before we fall off the sofa of impending poverty.
Yeah. I think I want to keep it simple again and focus on gratitude, right? You've all heard the counter blessings type of exercise where every night before going to bed, you go through what in life you can be grateful for and do that for real. And the exercise is that you sit down and you visualize it as well. You go through your life and you look at the people in your life one by one and you say to her, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for what you give me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to give to you, right? And also focus on that everyone in your life, they're there also to teach you something. So when you go through, also say, I'm grateful for what you teach me. And go through each and every one and feel it. Feel the love, feel the connection, feel the purpose. And then people, places, things, everything in your life that is available to you. And then when you have gone through that list and when you can really feel it to connect, decide that I want to make the best out of all my opportunities. I dedicate myself to be creative beyond my own needs. I am contributing. I am creating. I am lifting. I'm living in purpose. I'm living in love. And try to feel it. Try to see it. And again, dedicate yourself to being someone who is living with purpose. And not, oh, I need to find a purpose. As I said, it's everything you do where you contribute beyond your own selfish needs. So practice also that every day. Try to see each opportunity, each situation you are in And whenever you recognize that, oh, I'm being selfish now. Oh, I'm focused on my own needs here. Decide that I want to be in a state of purpose and say to yourself and to life, what can I do to contribute and co create beyond my own needs? What is needed? How can life use my skills? And then try to be open for life to use you and to show you what to do. Wealth is not what you have, it's how you live. It's the active experience of your life. It's your quality of life. It's your state of healing. It's your state of health. It's the level of love, connectedness, right? And feeling that you're part of something greater than yourself. It's a choice, it's a work. It doesn't just happen. So you need to be dedicated to be that individual because no matter your skill level, no matter your level of consciousness, this is something you are completely able to do. It's in you. It's a natural state of any individual. And we need to fill that kind of job description for ourselves. So be a person of purpose, of creativity, and gratitude, and just let everything flow through you. And always, always go beyond your own selfish needs. Then you will always feel wealthy and you will have more than you will ever need.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This has been IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program in the world, really, giving you spiritual advice for your everyday life. Remember again to subscribe to our channel, IKYA.official, here on YouTube. And most importantly, share this video and all of our IKYA Lives and other teachings that are available for free on our YouTube channel. It is how we assist the planet in lifting the consciousness and elevating our conversation with each other, increasing love, generosity, and gratitude. So also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, IKYA.official, and share, share, share. Last but not least, if these teachings, if IKYA Live, if this way of approaching life interests you, if it lights you up, well, then you need to check out IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing Collection 4, our 1 year spiritual study that is starting in just a few weeks on the 21st of June. So check that out as well at ikya.org. And you can also see the open house that we had last week about the course for free here on the IKYA YouTube channel. So again, thank you from all of us from IKYA's summer studio, and we look forward to seeing you next week from IKYA Center, both physically and online for IKYA Live at 7 o'clock next Monday. Thank you again from all of us here at IKYA Center, and see you again soon.